As KTIB approached the end of the 1990s, a new voice was introduced that combined a love for sports with the awareness of people's thirst for news. That voice belonged to David Saltzman. Let's hear to how David remembers his days at KTIB.
How you doing today, David?
Great. Thank you, William. Any time I get a chance to say hi to the listeners back home, I'll jump at the opportunity. So thanks for having me on.
No problem. Well, like I said, we want to try to get reacquainted with you and so many of the other personalities we'll be having on the air. How exactly did you first get involved in the world of broadcasting? Was this something you admired from when you were a kid?
Oh, I've been a sports fan ever since probably came out of the womb. In fact, my parents will tell stories of how before I could even talk, I'd run around with a football and crash on the couch, kind of making the last second dash to score a touchdown. So it's interesting because when I was growing up, I never thought of doing broadcasting. Yet in my head, whenever I'd watch a game, I'd always do the play-by-play in my head. So it was, I believe, late high school. It must have been late high school that suddenly hit me. It's like, well, why don't I try to do this thing for a living? This sounds like fun. So I took broadcast journalism courses at UT in Austin. I was a broadcasting major, graduated, and then moved on to Lufkin, Texas, where I was for 2 years. Did some high school and junior college sports there. But I also did news. Basically, I was like, I'll do anything to get on the air doing sports. So that was actually, besides some of the classes I had, the first time I really did news full-time. In Lufkin, I started my own news department. It was a good experience, but I never felt that, the area, because, it was new and the station didn't have a tradition of news, they didn't see us as a news station. It was still a music station. So when I came to KTIB, it really opened my eyes because I was so pleased that the station had such a long tradition of covering news and having a wonderful reputation. I was all ready for the challenge, and so I was really excited to get to Thibodeau, completely new place, to meet new people, and then accept the challenge of doing the news, and then, of course, doing the Nicholls State Sports as well.
Now, tell me, when you first came down here, did you kind of go into culture shock with some of the accents?
Yeah, not as much the accents as I forget what it's exactly called. I went to a Chevron there in Thibodeau, and they had shrimp in coolers right as you walked in the door. I'm like, well, I haven't seen this before. In a Chevron convenience store, you could buy seafood. So I was like, yeah, this is different than what I'm used to. But I loved it, to be honest. I instantly became enamored with it, and goodness, who doesn't like real good Cajun food? And I learned that I hadn't had real Cajun food until I came down to Thibodeau. So culture shock, yes, but not in a negative sense at all.
Now, what was the first year what was the year you started working at KTIB?
I was there in '98, and talk about maybe culture shock. It was a shock. Like I mentioned, the news department was very well represented, and I was really lucky because when I got there, it was kind of in the way the end of an era with some of the people who worked for so many years. Ray Sadie, of course, Marie Bergeron, and Roy Vicknair, who I all highly regard. And in the first 2 months I was there, and you'll know this being the weather expert you are, we had 4 threats of tropical storm or hurricane in 4 straight weeks. It was Earl, I think it was George. I know there was George and there was Hermine, and I forget the one that started with an F, maybe you know.
Tropical Storm Francis.
Bingo. Yeah, and that was one of the major ones. And so the first few months I was in Thibodeau, I couldn't find an apartment, so I actually stayed in a room at Marie Bergeron's place. And poor Miss Marie had to wake me up so often. It was like, there's a storm coming, you got to get to the station, So instantly I knew that this was different than any other place I had been because, people for very good reason take these systems very seriously. And even when a storm isn't even in the Gulf, it would get, top billing. And I always looked at Roy strangely, and I'm like, well, why is this on the top of the news? It's barely here yet. And he was like, oh, it's a big concern, and you'll understand as time goes by. And certainly I did. And those 4 weeks were something. I never really got an even amount of sleep just because of the threats of the storms, but it instantly brought me closer to the culture and just what people think about, the concerns, and the responsibilities that I had in being in the news department there.
Now, how did you first get contacted to come down here and work?
I was doing high school and junior college sports, again in Lufkin, and it was my goal to move on from there and basically do any Division I sport I could find. I mean, I knew I wouldn't be able to do an LSU or a big school like that, so I thought, if there's any way I can get to, a good Division I school that's smaller, that could be a good step for me. So I sent tapes out everywhere, and including to KTIB, because I knew they did Nicholls State. I actually sent them tapes twice. I sent the first tape after my first year at Lufkin, and I remember vividly talking to Ray Sadie, and his words were, well, why do you want to come down to Thibodaux? Here's me, a guy from Texas, and I just said, I just wanted to do Nicholls State sports, period. After the first year, Darren Fonz was doing a great job there, and was still working at KTIB, so Mr. Sadie said, well, keep trying, you can keep in touch, and so I sent the tape the next year, and that's when Darren had decided to leave, and I was very fortunate to get the job. So it was me who initiated it, and I was very pleased to do so, to be introduced there, and to be able to move down there. I had a great time.
Well, you were here, I guess, for some 3 years, and, well, of course, on the beautiful offices on Green Street. Were there any particular stories in the 3 years that you covered news and sports that seemed to really stand out in your mind?
Oh, the storms. Waking up, doing all night at KTIB because of the weather, especially the time. And actually, I remember talking to you during this day when Thibodaux had the record, 16 inches of rain in 24 hours.
The first day of Allison, yeah.
Yeah, first day of Allison. And it's an interesting story because I went to sleep regular time, and I never, ever wake up due to a storm. But it just happened on this night that I did. It was 1 o'clock, and I woke up and, knew it was storming pretty badly and looked outside, and you couldn't see the road. And so I was like, well, gosh, this is pretty serious. I wonder if anyone's trying to call KTIB just for an update. So I call and check the messages, and sure enough, Mayor Kiowa had left a message saying, if anyone's there, please tell people to stay off the roads. It's too dangerous with the weather, and we're going to get more rain. So I'm like, well, great, we're not supposed to be on the roads, but I got to get to KTIB somehow. So I called the Thibodaux Police Department, and the guys there were so great. And pretty much the whole time I was on my cell phone as I got into my car. They navigated me from my apartment on Himalaya all the way to KTIB, because you couldn't go down Canal at all. So I remember, I don't know the exact streets, but had to go near Thibodaux High, near where the Fireman's Fair is located. And very out of the way way to get to KTIB, but I was able to get there, and I got on the air at about 2:30, and interviewed just about everyone, and everyone was so nice to get on the air just to keep the people informed. It's great, and again, I mentioned about the reputation of KTIB. I know we've always had a good base of loyal listeners, but it's when those types of things happen, people instantly know that KTIB is the station to listen to, and I think it's great that for all those years, and even now, that it still has that reputation.
And then the crazy part was, another 4 days of another 19 inches of rain to go through.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess fortunately it wasn't as bad as that first day, but those were certainly some times when we were ready for the sun to come out. But those are the times when KTIB really stands out, because we're fortunately able to bring the news with more of a local flavor. Of course, the New Orleans stations do great, but as far as the Thibodaux-Houma area, I think we were able to make it even more specific to the people who were listening.
Now, you also covered sports for a good while you were here. Were there any particular sports stories that seemed to stand out in that period of time?
Oh, wow. Well, I'll be honest, I don't miss the 11-hour bus rides to San Marcos.
Wow.
Those I don't miss. I do definitely miss the time I spent with the teams and on the air. As far as sports stories go, I think what I took away the most, and this is going to sound corny, but it's true, was just the work that the coaches put in. To be honest, compared to other schools in the Southland, Nicholls State doesn't have, the facilities, the funding, and the great thing is, though, the coaches don't use that as an excuse. They see it as a challenge. And so the guys like Darrell Day, Ricky Broussard, B.D. Parker now with the baseball team, work very hard to be able to make Nicholls State not only competitive, but also good in the Southland. That's what I get away from it. So, when I hear about the football team able to contend for the Southland Conference Championship this coming year, no pressure, Darrell, that's just a testament to the work that they've done. And so I always had a very, high respect for for what they did and for what they continue to do. I'll always remember that.
So KTIB's been the home of the Saints for so long. You were here from 98 to 2001, and I tell you what, it must have been sometimes a little upsetting to have to cover the latter days of Mike Ditka, as we know how that turned out. And then, of course, the early days of Jim Haslett, which, in 2000 turned out to be a tremendous season for the Saints.
Sure, because when Coach Haslett got there, they went to Thibodeau for training camp, and so I was able to get and you too, and everyone in the area, a much closer look of the team, and that was a lot of fun, to be sure. One regret I have is that I remember I was at Bubba's, and this was up to the quarterback club, and Stan Williamson, the old athletic director, was there talking to me and a guy with a comment, and he said, we're really making a push for the Saints to come to training camp. My reaction was, well, it's good to try, but there's going to be another place that can do a better job. That was really my mistake and my regret, because the comment ran with the story, and I waited on it, and so of course the rest is history. That Nichols was able to get to camp, and that was always very enjoyable to me too. I didn't cover them very closely with when they had Ditka. We carried the games, but we would carry some stories. But it was real fun to get up close to the players, to the coaches when they were in Thibodeau, and I know they're going to be in New Orleans for training camp this coming season, but I know that was a good memory for me and probably for you too.
Well, of course, that training camp of 2000, the Saints really lucked out. I think only part of one practice got rained out. Had an exceptionally dry year that year, and I'd always heard that, isn't it kind of funny that they always talked about how well the Heat trained them for the regular season, and now 3 years later they decide they're going to build an indoor facility in Metairie to practice in.
Well, I guess the rain got the best of them the second year. I remember that. There was a lot of rain, and I guess they had to drive all the way to Metairie for the indoor facility. Wasn't some sort of old sugar mill supposed to be an indoor facility? I guess that never went through, and maybe that's a big reason why they're in Metairie now.
Yeah, well, actually, in part, what had happened, they were supposed to use the old LeFou Sugar's warehouse on the west side of Thibodeau. They found a sag in the floor in the old warehouse, and unfortunately the new warehouse wouldn't be ready for at least another year, so that was kind of hampering the problems in 2001.
Sure.
Now, you're here in beautiful Thibodeau for a good while, and you mentioned earlier, of course, the brief while when you first started working with Marie Bergeron and Roy Vickner, who really made themselves names, that made names of themselves both at KTIB and KHOM. So I take it, working with them on a regular basis, all the experience they brought in, it must have been a tremendous asset, to have so many knowledgeable people working with you.
Yeah, because Lufkin, I started the news on my own, and there wasn't anything to compare it to. And so I come to Thibodeau, and Marie and Roy have done such a good job for 20, 30 years, and so I knew that I at least had to match that, and that was the challenge. And KTIB had such a good reputation for the news. And it was great to work with them because they brought a discipline, a seriousness to the job, very much took it seriously as it should be, but also had fun at the same time. Learned a lot from them, and most of all, just learned a lot about about Thibodeau and about certain events in the area. Because if I had pretty much been solo there, it would have been a lot harder for me to know more about the area and get used to it and feel a part of Louisiana, like a Louisiana citizen. Certainly made some mistakes at the beginning. I had no idea how to pronounce Chauvin or Gaines, and I'm sure new people still have trouble adjusting. I called Schlumberg Schlumberger the first time. So I made my share of mistakes, but Marie and Roy were always there, and Race 82 to be able to help me through those beginning times and make me really feel a part of the family and a part of the Thibodeau area very quickly. So it was great to work with them, and I was lucky because I started with them, and then of course they went off and retired, and then some new people came in, and I was able to continue that on when Mike Starr bought the station. So in a way, I guess I was the only one to be there for the end of that era, and then the beginning of the next one. So it's pretty fortunate.
Now, earlier we talked about some of the more serious stories that you had covered. Was there any, I take it while you were here, I'm sure there was probably a lot of funny and lighthearted moments that occurred with you both on and off the air as well.
Always. Live radio, who knows what's going to happen? So there were certainly some funny moments, some funny moments throughout. Definitely with the morning show and getting news on the air. Fortunately, I guess there weren't as many of those funny moments than the ones when we really had to step up to the plate. And I remember the storms and also a tornado in Houma, where we were really fortunate to get on the air with it first and be on the air for about 2-3 hours covering it and talking to people at the scene. I remember a building collapsed in Houma, you may remember. But there were definite moments throughout, a lot of light-hearted moments off the air, which I won't mention, but it was very enjoyable.
Well, and like I say, KTIB, part of the culture, and I guess we're very lucky, of course, in the community to have such a good station to provide all this information. I was very fortunate after you left. I had the honor of covering Hurricane Lily with them, and back in October of 2002. And that's one secret I think a lot of us would like to know. Is it rather difficult when you got to stay on for many, many hours, to cover a breaking story? Are there any little secrets that you have to stay when you had to stay on for so long without possibly falling asleep?
Number one, have a lot of water. But number two, also, a lot of people who listen to the radio, they'll listen to it for a long stretch of time, but then others will join on the air maybe 10, 20, 30 minutes in a certain segment after you've started. So when that happens, it's always good to just repeat what's been said, always repeat it just to make sure people know exactly what's going on. And I think our advantage, again, with the reputation we had that was started long before me, was that people would just call us. It's very hard calling someone trying to get a hold of them, but we'd have the mayor and city officials call us, those from the Office of Emergency Preparedness call us, and any new interview we could get on was great because we could keep it fresh. But always remember, there's a reason why the Weather Channel exists. The Weather Channel doesn't do much different than, say, the weather, but it's very, very popular, especially in those times, because people always want to know information, make sure they know it completely, and get any new information possible. So, as long as you keep, repeating the major things, such as, when's the storm going to hit, or is it going to hit, and then get any new information on as you can as time goes on, then that's what the listeners want.
Now, was it kind of get all the listeners caught up now? What have you done since leaving us in 2001?
My life is different. I'm no longer in radio. I work for a financial planning firm called North Star Resource Group, which is a fantastic firm with great people. I'm a financial planner now. I work in Austin. I also travel to Houston and San Antonio, mainly focusing on those our age, just with getting financial plans started, being able to reach financial independence and all their goals in the future. a lot different than what I did in Thibodeau, of course, but I'm finding it to be very rewarding. I really enjoy it, and I definitely think it's going to be something I'm going to do for the rest of my working years. So I was very lucky when I decided to leave Thibodeau to get a job like this in Austin, where I was already familiar with going to school here, and just being able to be a part of a wonderful company that's been around for a long time and that's going to be around for a while.
That's okay. It was probably hard leaving all the millions of dollars you made here to go out there. So
millions of dollars. Ray City kept all those.
Oh, okay. Now, but I tell you what. But I take it in terms, I guess, of emotion that it must have been a pretty hard decision to leave here, a place you'd been for 3 years. Though, of course, as you just said, to go back to familiar surroundings.
Well, it was. I didn't want to leave Thibodeau because of the friendships I had made and the friendships I still have. In fact, I'm planning on being there in November for the Big East State game, again, which are supposed to be for the Southland Conference Championship. Don't jinx anyone. So I want to get there once a year. I was there 2 years ago. Didn't get there last year because I got married in October, so the honeymoon was my big trip for that time. But my wife Laura and I are going to be down there in November, and we want to be down there once a year. But as far as leaving, I had decided after it was obvious I wouldn't be able to do Nickel State games anymore, which was the primary reason I came there, that it would be better to move on. At first, I wanted to stay in sports, and then I got a couple of job offers. One in San Angelo, Texas, doing their games, and I had a couple of others. but decided it was time to move to a place where I just felt I could settle. I didn't want to move to somewhere in hopes of moving again. And Laura, my wife, we were already engaged at the time that I was still in Thibodeau, and decided she was already in Austin, and so decided it was just best to move there. But definitely a tough decision, and I definitely miss the people at Thibodeau and can't wait to get back there in November just to see them all.
Well, listen, we greatly appreciate your time and this, looking back at the history of this organization. And I tell you what, we can't thank you enough for sharing so many fond memories with us.
Well, they're fond memories because of the people there, and I always enjoyed Thibodeau, and the main thing I enjoyed were the people, because they were just so nice. A lot of people I work with are from the Minnesota area, and there's a phrase called Minnesota nice because the people are nice up there, and certainly they are, but they don't know what nice is when it comes to the people. They're always willing to give a hand, always willing to give support, always feel comfortable everywhere I went. I didn't know a single person, not just in Thibodeau, but the whole state when I moved there, and felt at home very, very quickly. So I appreciate it, and there's a reason why I want to come back every year, and it's because of all you guys. And again, can't wait to see you guys. And William, keep up the good work over there. You and Linda and Laura and Chuck, I know the station's in good hands, but keep up the good work.
No problem. We'll try to do the best despite Gene Richard hosting dialogue now. But...
Oh, well, 45 minutes, you can't get all 24 hours right. No, just kidding. This Gene as well, and I hear a lot of great things about him hosting dialogue, and I'm glad that show is in good hands also.
Well, very good. Well, we really greatly appreciate all this time.
Thank you, William, and again, hi to everyone, and best of luck to all of you.
David Saltzman. Another reason why KTIB has been the station's South Louisiana residents' trust